Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. The QAnon conspiracy didn't go away when the election was over. For the past month, a group of followers have been posting up at Dealey Plaza in Texas, waiting for JFK Jr. to return and run for president. And one of the men telling them it would happen is from Federal Way. Seattle Times political reporter Jim Brunner is here to tell us what's going on. But first, some headlines. It's election day again, but just for some Seattleites. Voters in District 3 will decide today whether to recall their city council member Shama Sawant. Turnout so far is just over 38% as of Monday afternoon. If you're a D3 voter, you have until 8 o'clock tonight to get your ballot into a drop box or mailed with today's postmark. We'll get early results tonight, but you know the drill. It could take all week to get final results, and Sawant has closed election night gaps before. We'll keep you updated right here and at KUOW.org. Ballard Commons Park temporarily closes to the public this morning, ending a long-running tent camp that's been a neighborhood controversy for years. The city says it's been able to get many of the people living there into shelter, but anyone who hasn't already left will be asked to leave today. After that, there'll be a fence around the Commons for a bit while the Parks Department works on repairs. And a state appeals court has overturned the cold case murder convictions against a man accused of killing a young Canadian couple in 1987. In 2018, William Earl Talbot was arrested using DNA and genetic genealogy to identify him as the killer. The Everett Herald reports the justices determined that one of the jurors should have been dismissed because she didn't know if she could be fair in a trial about violence against women. Jay Cook and Tanya Van Kylenborg were traveling from Victoria to Seattle when they were killed. According to the Herald, Talbot will get a new trial unless prosecutors win their appeal to the state Supreme Court. It'll be partly cloudy in the 60s this week in Dallas, Texas, where hundreds of QAnon followers are apparently still waiting for JFK Jr. to come back and retake the presidency with former President Donald Trump.
Word on the street is that JFK Jr. will show up and introduce his parents.
12:29, the same time of day that JFK Sr. was shot here in the spot.
Probably the majority of us know that JFK Jr. is alive.
And as it turns out, the guy who seems to be leading a lot of this is local. Luckily, Jim Brunner's here. He covers politics for the Seattle Times. He's going to help us explain. Hey, Jim.
Hi.
Let's just get this out of the way right now because I am sure someone is wondering why we are even talking about this. Why did you want to tell this story?
Yeah, I had some readers react to the article I wrote saying, why would you give publicity to a guy who has these kind of what seemingly very crazy beliefs? And first of all, I am very just personally interested in how people slip into conspiratorial thinking. So that's part of the answer. Secondly, though, this guy, Michael Protzman, has been in the national news. You know, it had been sort of mentioned in some national accounts that he was from Federal Way. And that just got me really interested because there hasn't been much said about him here. And thirdly, this QAnon conspiracy thinking isn't going away. It is leading a lot of people down some rabbit holes. And in this case, people have flown across the country to be with this man in the apparent hope that JFK Jr. is somehow coming back and reinstating Donald Trump as president.
Yeah, let's catch listeners up here. Michael Protzman from Federal Way is in Dealey Plaza in Texas. Help me understand what's going on there.
Yeah, Michael Protzman, I interviewed some QAnon experts and they said, an author that I interviewed said he and others that he's in touch with, researchers who've watched QAnon for a long time, hadn't really known about him until he came on the scene, in Dallas. But it turns out that he had built a social media following on the Telegram app, which is where a lot of right-wing conspiracy believers and others who are just have been run off Twitter or whatever have gathered. And he had attracted about 100,000, nearly 100,000 subscribers on there. So through that account, and I think through some other maybe chat rooms and areas that I'm not privy to, he had convinced a bunch of people that basically that Trump and others are speaking in sort of this numerology code that he had deciphered, and that it all pointed to this almost religious happening where Trump is going to magically be reinstated as president, destroy all his enemies, and JFK Jr. is somehow going to be involved, even though he died in 1999.
Okay, so Michael Protzman shows up in March. He has more than 100,000 followers at this point. Who is he, and how did he manage to do this?
Yeah, that's what I got really interested in. And I think if you read the article I wrote, there's sort of a sad personal story that accompanies his rise in conspiracy circles. He is a longtime Federal Way resident. He owned a demolition business for, I think, maybe 20 or 30 years. He and his wife ran it. And somewhere along the lines, the last few years, he started to more intensely believe in, I think, farther and farther out conspiracy theories. I found one neighbor who said a few years back, he was going around the neighborhood telling everyone they needed to buy silver. But then started to take, obviously, a pretty bad turn. In 2019, his wife called police. They were in the process of getting divorced. And when she talked to the police, his wife, who we're not naming, told them that he had changed. He had gotten kind of stranger. He had stopped showering. He'd stopped working. And he was just going on about government conspiracy theories. And so between that time and, sometime earlier this year when he started this Telegram channel, at some point he's just, fully embraced this conspiracy life, and his previous life, he appears to sort of have left it behind.
What's he up to in Dallas right now?
Well, as far as I know, he and these other people have been down there since, I think, at least October. They've been going out to this Dealey Plaza where he talks about how various sentences, if you use a simple numerical code called gematria, add up to certain numbers. Like, I think Michael Protzman, I don't have it all in front of me, equals 174. It's a very simple code. A equals 1, Z equals 26. He seems to believe that these numbers that add up to various things predict the future or show hidden knowledge, and how Trump has been speaking in code for years.
Yes, I am coming home, 174. Yes, John Kennedy, 174. I am Jesus Christ, 174. Yes, John Kennedy, 174.
I'm so curious what the power is of this man, because you and I are talking about things that most people would consider to be way off the grid.
It is way off the grid, and people are getting into self-reinforcing circles here on social media and YouTube. Kind of shows how dangerous I think some of this stuff can be. But I've read stories in other media. Vice News has covered this really extensively. I think I quoted them in my article too. They've talked to family members who've said, their relative just, maybe they're having a hard time in their life, and they see this movement as explaining everything, and they acquire a belief that they're part of something larger than themselves. And I think that's the power that attracts people to it. It's really hard to get people out of it once they get in. since the article ran, I've heard from one or two people who say that their relatives have joined this group and they're very concerned. And, they're asking me if there's anything, how do they monitor the group? And I've given them what I can, but it's pretty difficult. They're still down there staying in a hotel in Dallas.
Who's financing this, Jim?
Well, one woman told Vice News that her sister had given the group $200,000, kind of went all in. So that would go pay for hotel rooms for a while. And they have also been raising money. I think they've set up those crowdfunding sites. I think that there are some sort of extremism researchers who are trying to get those sites to shut them down. That's always a push and pull. Other than that, they're not like an official group. I don't think they have a nonprofit, or it's just a loose group of people.
It's easy to dismiss this, but I wonder where this story is heading, because these are real people and families who are being impacted by this situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people are still down there in Dallas with him. I think it started out in the hundreds maybe, or, many dozens, and it's dwindled to a few, fewer hardcore believers. But there is a link, I think, here to extremist movements that have been in America for a long time. You think about sovereign citizen movements and things like this, where people think that they know the true answers about the Constitution and what's really going on in the country and the cabals that are running things, and that nobody can convince them otherwise. And some of these people who have gotten into QAnon have committed violence. or have gone into pizza shops with assault rifles looking for the secret pedophile ring, things like that. And also, I would say that it is a fringe movement, QAnon, and this Michael Protzman's a fringe within a fringe, maybe. But there are elements of QAnon that have crept into Republican politics and are becoming sidling closer to the mainstream, I would say, of Republican politics in some cases. There are some dozens of candidates across the country, Republican candidates who have expressed sympathy, or spread QAnon memes and things like that. I don't think it's going away. I think it needs to be addressed and reported on.
I wonder if this says anything bigger about the moment we've been living in. Clearly, people are searching. Jim, they're searching.
Yeah, I wonder too. I do think that maybe this pandemic has put added pressure on people psychically, mentally. For me, I would say I'm not running off to Dallas on some strange fantasy, but, I could see where people are fed up with things that are going on. And you've seen a lot of conspiracy thinking creep into the talk about what's going on in the pandemic too. It's all linked. If you look at Michael Protzman and what he says and what his followers say about, the pandemic and vaccines, it's all part of the same conspiracy. And I think in some cases, like public health officials or government officials haven't done the best job at messaging, and some of their early statements, conflict with what they're saying now. So that doesn't help it, with people sliding down into these strange corners of the internet and belief systems.
Yeah. Desperation, power, and fear, Jim. Very, very bad combination.
Yeah, it's not great. And, I really felt a lot of sympathy when I wrote about Michael Protzman and, to the readers who reached out to me and were mad or left voice messages. I tried to say, look, I'm not trying to be exploitative here. I am fascinated. And some of the stuff, I do laugh at some of it. It's so absurd. It's ridiculous, but it's sort of like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, you used to laugh about InfoWars and why people would believe that. And then you essentially have a, president who's elected who is, pretty tied with Alex Jones. And Alex Jones is a big fan. So this stuff all matters.
Yeah, definitely. Jim Brunner, really appreciate your time. Jim Brunner covers politics for the Seattle Times. Thanks so much for telling us this story.
Thanks. Glad to talk.
Thanks for listening. Jason Pagano produced today's show, which is also made by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, Diana Opong, and Jenny Cecil Moore. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy.